Hello and welcome to the Cardiac Cats YouTube channel. I'm your host, Jacob Shorba, and we're here to recap Week 6 of the 2024 NFL season that just never seems to end for Jacksonville. And God, do I want it over at this point. 1-5 for the Jaguars. And I'm not shocked. I may pretend to be at times, but it's not surprising that this team is losing at this point. It's the same thing over and over, rinse and repeat. At the end of the day, like last week, to me, the result of beating the Colts was all about, is this really what the team is going to be going forward? Or is this just the Colts curse coming into effect again? That's going to save the Jaguars from, staring 0-5 at the face. And that's pretty clearly what it ended up being. Now, I want to apologize. I have to start on the screen, but I'm going to be doing this for the rest of this year. Until this team gets its crap together, which, by the way, it will not do that this year, this is where we need to start. Because this just makes the point pretty clear. This team sucks. And it's not just, oh, they're below average. They're dog shit. Okay? Let's be real about where they are. And so we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about this game that, it's not all negatives, but at some point, it's hard to care, right? Like, if you cannot win against a rookie quarterback in London, in your backyard, essentially, which is what it is for Jacksonville, I mean, what are you doing at this point? Like, this game, well, I looked at it early. It was 3-0. I thought, oh, this is just going to be like a really close, low-scoring game. And all of a sudden, Chicago just beating the living crap out of Jacksonville. Mistakes everywhere. Just terrible finish to the game for the Jaguars. And it's the same thing at the press conferences again. It's the same old, oh, we got to figure out what the answer is. We don't know, guys, but we're going to get figured out this week. Trust us, because if we've done anything, the team that has lost 10 of the last 12 games with wins over Carolina with Bryce Young and the Colts in Jackson, that team should be trusted at this point. They just don't deserve it. I mean, we all know this at this point. I don't think there's anyone who's really arguing against that, so I'm kind of preaching to the choir. That's where we are. So this is not going to be as long of a recap as maybe what some others have been. At least that's the plan. There's not a lot of substance to get out of these individual player performances or where they are. This season's over, guys. We're 1-5, and at this point, we're enjoying what we can from the NFL season, which usually has nothing to do with the Jaguars, and we're just hoping to get a reset, because that's what this team needs. That's what this team should have done last offseason. But I'll talk more about that again. So, individual performances. First and foremost, I got home today. I had checked the score. One time early, it was 3-0. The first thing I see when I sit down on the couch and watch this game is a horrific drive from Trevor Lawrence and an interception. And my immediate reaction was, oh, we're back to the same old same. And then I looked at the stats, and then I heard from fans that were saying, well, why would you go after Trevor Lawrence? He's been like the one good guy today. And I watched the drops. This was not Trevor Lawrence's fault. Okay? Now, I do not think that Trevor Lawrence is playing at the ideal level, but I think it's more than enough for this team to be competitive today, and not only competitive, but to probably win the game. But this is where we are. So 23 of 35, this was 17 of 24, I know, at one point, and it was probably even better earlier on in the game, so there's good accuracy from Lawrence. To me, it's more so the questions about being able to process the whole field. How is the passing game being planned? Because, as you'll see, Brian Thomas Jr. had 27 yards on the day. The one thing they're succeeding on this year, the one area where it's clear that they're really strong right now, is their ability to stretch the field with Brian Thomas Jr. And that has opened up everything else. It's made this team look adequate in the run game. They've had good running backs, so we've thought. And they've been able to throw more to Christian Kirk as well, who has been open because he's not the primary guy for opposing teams to look at. And so that's really, to me, how this whole offense has to operate. But for some reason, they're just like, oh, we beat the Colts. Let's go back to our stupid dink and dunk bull crap. And what do you get out of that? you get a loss, right? And you get a pretty bad loss, 35-16. But that's the first thing that stands out to me here, along with Evan Ingram, 10 receptions, 102 yards. I would say it was a big day for him if it wasn't for the fact that he came out of the half and immediately fumbled the ball on the first play that the offense had. I mean, that's pretty bad, right? But I don't know. I'm not gonna like go blame this whole loss on him or anything like that. He had a pretty good day outside of obviously the really bad fumble. Now, other things to note here. Look at this great rushing attack. I mean, what is going on here? I know Travis Etienne apparently got hurt, but nothing there for him. Nothing at all. You got Tank Bigsby, who just didn't really end up doing a whole lot. Dearness Johnson got in late. Almost all these yards are off of like 2 rushes from the last drive Jacksonville had. I mean, there's nothing. I just I get to a point where it's like we've said so many times on this channel that you cannot just build an offensive line that has the sole purpose of protecting the quarterback. That's important, but the run game's also important too. And especially if you're not going to open it up by stretching the field and you want to do the stupid dink and dunk crap, you have to have blockers who are capable of making an impact, right? And Ezra Cleveland's been the one guy I want to take out of that equation and say, look, he's been good. He's been really good. He's been one of the best guards in the NFL so far this year. Maybe he had a good game. Maybe he had a bad game. Honestly, I didn't get to watch the offensive lineman too much specifically. But this says a whole lot about this team when you have no rushers over 30 yards. It's not like Jacksonville was behind the whole game either. Let's be clear about that. This was a low-scoring game going into the late part of the second quarter. And Jacksonville was still in the game early on in the third, and then obviously blew it up with the fumble, and everything went from there. But I don't know. I don't know what to say. It's like they just have no interest in actually building a proper run game, and then they wonder why their offense doesn't function well. But whatever. In other news regarding that, last night was pretty rough for anyone who follows my draft content and all that, because biggest my guy I had of the year, Ohio State left tackle Josh Simmons. Perfect fit for Jacksonville. You're going to hear a lot about him before the draft, especially if he declares, and I think he has to at this point. I'm not sure he can get a waiver to return, and he's a senior. But it was a player that I felt like was a perfect fit for Jacksonville, probably going to be around one of the picks that they would have at the end of the day. Ends up getting a big injury last night. Probably not going to return. It's a crappy weekend for football, I guess is the way I'm going to put this. But I don't know. You're going to have to make some big investments in this upcoming draft class, in this offensive line. I think you're looking at a guy like him. I think you're looking at this Alabama offensive line with guys like Tyler Booker, for example. Maybe you look at a Parker Brailsford, really good center prospect. Like, we're going to have to spend a lot of time talking about this offensive line because it is still an issue. Even if they had 2 weeks in a row that were good enough, they're not strong on this team. They're not a strong suit of the Jaguars. So, same story is all I've got to say there. Now, I'll talk a little bit more about the defense here. Ventrell Miller is continuing to get involved for this defense. Now, I have not got to do like a film study on him at all. I don't know if we'll do one too awfully soon, especially just because as much as fans want to like be excited about a young player who's starting to play well, it doesn't really make sense for him to be a starter. You're benching a Pro Bowl caliber linebacker in Foye Oluokun, or you're benching Devin Lloyd when he's having one of his best years. And he's had some bad moments. I'm not saying that he's free of that, but you could say that for basically this whole defense at this point. But I do want to give you guys a look at least at how Ventrell Miller has been playing up to this point. He's got a couple grades in here. Surprisingly, kind of a low grade. So I don't know if it's something where he's just kind of going all out on the plays on the field. He's been fine in run defense, but overall, kind of just everywhere for his grades, right? So I don't know what to make of it at this point. It's nice to see him making some big plays. He's been physical. I like that side of it. But I'd probably have to watch the film to really come to any kind of different conclusion. So that's kind of where I sit on that. Now, Andre Cisco, I think this was the first interception of the year for Jacksonville. Maybe I'm forgetting something. I don't think Joe Flacco had one last week against Jacksonville. We had none up to that point. So that took a long time. But, good for him. But other than that, this defense started off strong, completely crapped the bed, and died at the end of the game. Not going to say a whole lot outside of that. Now, okay, actually, one thing to note. Mason Smith, first sack. I want to make sure I don't forget that. What I want to kind of end this on, I want to talk about what Andre Cisco said after the game, which I'm sure a lot of people have seen, and then just where do the Jaguars go from here? A little bit of looking back at where they've been in the last year, and have they really done the right things? Answer is no, by the way. What Andre Cisco was saying at the end of the game, in a post-game interview, that there's a lot of quit on this team. That's bad. That's not something you want to hear. I'm not gonna try to read into that too much because I think it's a very simple statement that tells you a lot, right? If people are quitting on this team right now, this message that this season is not over is falling on deaf ears. And you can see it on the field. When you're watching these players, there's guys who are still giving effort. There's guys who are not. And this is the result you get. And you get the same stuff after games. You get the same, we don't know. We're going to figure it out, though. We're going to have to compete in every game. We got to go 1-0 and urgency and all that same stuff. You hear the same thing every week. Right? Except for this last week where we had to basically worship them for being a Colts team in Jacksonville. But, yeah. I think that tells you a lot about perhaps the locker room comments at one point. I don't think that was a whole bunch of nothing. Not saying that's the whole locker room, but if people were starting to feel that way, that was only going to get stronger with more failure from this team, and that has been the way things have gone. I think that's pretty hard to debate. And we were not that far away from this team being 0-6 at this point. Let's be clear about that. They nearly blew the game to Indianapolis last week in spectacular fashion. So even that one win is almost an asterisk next to it. But talking about just where this team is right now, the crappy part about this is that Shad Khan had to come out this weekend after a single win from a team that's played 5 games up to that point, was 1-4. And he had to say, oh yeah, I have full trust in all these guys. Full trust. I'm not worried. I believe in the coaches. I believe in the players. I believe in the GM. Right before this game. I don't care if you're saying that behind closed doors. If you're going to tell the public that right now, I don't know what to say. I mean, it's another comment that just looks really terrible from him. And obviously, if you don't have the faith, you don't go out and say those things. But we're 1-4 going into this game. This team had not earned anything. It was the fact that it was not only that, but doubling down on the comments, saying that he meant what he said when he said this was the best team in Jaguars history. And they're not. They're not even close. This is going to be one of the worst teams in Jaguars history. At this rate, I don't know what teams they beat. I mean, maybe the Patriots next week. And that will be a game where they will have every conceivable advantage that you could have in a game against what might be the worst team in football outside of the Jacksonville Jaguars. If they lose that game, I think he's got to fire him after all this. I don't know how you could possibly not fire them after that game. It probably should have happened before this point. I think you look at the Robert Saleh firing, for example, which I don't know if we've recorded a video since then. I don't think we have. But they were 2-3. Okay? those are also Super Bowl aspirations in New York, and that's what it is here too. Don't get it wrong. It's not just about making a Super Bowl. This was supposed to be about winning a Super Bowl. Whether or not you believed that, which I was one of the people who didn't even know if they'd make the playoffs, that's still the expectation they set. And now at this point, I mean, we're getting to a point in the season where you're going to run out of losses that you can take, conceivably, to make the playoffs. Like, if they lose the next 2 weeks, for example, they're at 7 losses then. Right now, you're 4 losses away from guaranteeing a losing record. And you play some tough teams down the road. This is not an easy schedule for Jacksonville. They have an easy game perhaps next week, but you have the Packers, at least at home, on the road against the Eagles, hosting the Vikings, who are undefeated, on the road against the Lions, who are really good, hosting the Texans, who you don't beat at home, facing the Titans twice down here, hosting the Jets, going into Las Vegas, that's winnable, going into the Colts, that could be winnable too. And there's some winnable games. But this team, I do not see a possible path where they are having a winning record at this point. We're 1-5, and our owner is doubling down. Technically, doubled down at 1-4, but there's a staunch difference between two organizations that are seemingly looked at as, the laughing stock of the NFL. That's where the Jets have been. That's where this team has been. And we don't even take it as seriously as the other laughing stock at this point. So, I don't know. I don't think they can fire him after this week. I don't think you can fire someone a day after making those comments. I think the earliest would be if there's a brutal loss to the Patriots next week. I think he could get fired after that game as they come back from London. Otherwise, I don't know. It probably just waits out until they're essentially eliminated. Maybe they hit 9 losses. The season's over. And I think at this point, as much as fans are afraid that Trent Baalke is going to somehow survive this, his players are not playing well. I could not imagine a world where Shad Khan could keep him around and expect to sell tickets. He won't. It just will not happen. People will not attend the games. This team will continue to suffer. And it's going to get worse at that point. I just don't see how that's possible. It would theoretically set it up to where there would be no expectations that Trent Baalke could miss out on enough to get fired from his job. Because you would go from Super Bowl to worst team in the league. So, I don't know. I think this year, like I've said before, it was about getting answers, right? It should have been about Shad Khan, sorry. He's our owner. Can't fire him. It should have been about Trent Baalke as the GM. Should have been about Doug Pearson as the head coach. Should have been about Trevor Lawrence as the quarterback. There should have been no doubling down before this year on any of them. I'm not throwing out Lawrence as if he sucked, right? But he's not earned his contract. We are still at that point. He's a prospect right now. This year should have been about getting the answers. They rushed to conclusions on Lawrence. They bought in on this front office being incredible instead of saying, hey, maybe you guys should earn it. Now they look stupid. And now you're going to be in a situation where because you bought in so heavily on Trent Baalke that you cannot really get out of a lot of the things he's done. He's spent like crazy. He's pushed tons of void money into the future. And while it is not an untenable situation, it is at a disadvantage to the rest of the NFL. That's pretty clear at this point. And you're going to have to do things to recover from that. This is not going to be an ideal situation for a head coach. The only way it is if the head coach looks at Trevor Lawrence the same way that the fan base does and says, oh, he's the greatest quarterback we've ever had, and he's going to take us to the moon, right? That's the only way. And I don't know if you get out of year 4 with these kinds of results and are able to say that. It's going to be hard to see that being the case. I hope it is, of course. We have to believe in Lawrence, whether you do or not. And I think the jury is still out at this point. And it will continue to be out until probably at the very earliest the end of the season, most likely well beyond that. But that's where we stand. I just wish we didn't invest so much into a season like this to embarrass ourselves. This year should have been a reset. But here we are. So, with that all said, I do want to thank our channel members. Sorry. We have Premier Nasir, 904, and our Till We Die rank, and we have Mr. Dolphin on the prowl, and everyone else who supports this channel. If you guys want to sign up, you can see on the screen the cost per month and what is offered. Really excited for that, and ideally to get through the rest of the season. But that's all I've got. Hope you all have a great rest of your day. Enjoy your Sunday. Enjoy not having to watch the Jaguars for another week, and we'll see you soon. Go Jags.